Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've made radical changes in their lives for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Dov Baron, and he has an outstanding story to share with us. So without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Shay. Thanks for inviting me to be on the show. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve your audience. Sincerely appreciate that. It's always a bizarre question to me when somebody says, tell me your story, because who the hell has one?
Right? Good point.
Everybody's got a ton of them. But I'll give you the Reader's Digest of the big picture. I live, as we were talking about before we started recording, I live in North America. I live in Canada, in Vancouver, British Columbia. Very blessed to live here, but I was born actually in a ghetto in Northern England, in abject poverty, surrounded by crime and violence and addiction. At 21, I made the decision to leave at 14, and at 21 I left and began to travel the world and study with different spiritual teachers and philosophers from around the world. I studied Vedanta, which is Hindu philosophy, Buddhism, the Tao, Gnostic Christianity, and Kabbalah, Jewish philosophy, Jewish wisdom.
Wow.
Moved to France and Italy, then from France and Italy to New Brunswick to East Coast Canada. From there, I was in Asia and Indonesia, and then I lived in Australia for many years before I moved to Canada. So that's the sort of big sort of travel side of it. By the time I started to speak in 1984, so that long ago, yes, I am that old. So 30 odd years ago, got my first speaking gig by accident. Went on a couple of national tours in Australia. In the process, almost went bankrupt. Got very, very close. Ended up going to work on the gas lines to try and make some money in the northwest of Australia, which is on the edge of the desert. Worked up there for about 6 months before immigrating to Canada to start again. Came to Canada, was here for about 5-6 months, and then went back into the speaking world in what it was that I was doing in the human development side. And by the time 1990 came along, I was enormously successful. I was on TV, radio, newspapers, booked months in advance, and probably about as successful as I'd ever been in anything in my life. And then in June 1990, I went mountain climbing because I was an adrenaline junkie. My drug of choice, mainline, was adrenaline. And so on a particular beautiful June day in 1990, my buddy and I went to see a place called Brandywine Falls. It's up by Whistler, where the Winter Olympics were. It's this magnificent waterfall that drops 200 feet off the edge of a cliff. It's stunningly beautiful. And we went to the top and looked over, and then again, being adrenaline push, my buddy and I scrambled to the bottom. We hiked our way down, and then I challenged him, let's see if we can get behind the waterfall. And the spray off the waterfall that drops 200 feet is coming at you at 70 miles an hour. Yeah. It's pretty difficult to go into. And of course, you're climbing over wet, mossy rocks and all the rest of it. And we did get behind that. It was amazing. It was fantastic. And I came out on the other side that felt like freaking Superman, because all these negative ions, I'm pumped with adrenaline. There's nothing can stop me. And so, like the complete lunatic that I was, I said to my buddy, instead of hiking, let's climb the face. Now, if you know anything about mountain climbing, you need ropes, and you need all the safety lines and your pegs and all the other stuff. Free climbing is to do that, is to do the same climb, but without the ropes and the safety lines, etc. Free climbing is moderately insane. Fully insane is to try and do it while soaking wet with no chalk and not even the right shoes, right footwear. So at about 120 feet, which was about 12 stories, I reached for a rock that dislodged a bigger rock that bam, hit me in the face. Fortunately, knocked me unconscious and sent me at maximum velocity to land on my face, on my head, on the boulders below, where I got smashed to pieces.
Oh.
So that's the up to that point, what happened. I can tell you all kinds of gory details about the reconstructive surgeries, which I've had about 12 of, and the very dark and depression that came with that. But it was, in fact, the end of my life as I'd known it. at 32 years old. So that's the Reader's Digest version.
And what direction did you go after you began rebuilding?
You know, it's interesting because people will often say to me, you know, that must have changed your life. And I say, well, looking back, I can say that it did, but it actually didn't at the time. In fact, what I've discovered in my work, and you know, as you know, I work with high-level leaders who are business leaders, athletes, entrepreneurs, entertainers, people who are top of their game. And what I find is that people have this moment in their life that is this pivotal moment. You know, mine quite literally was falling off a mountain, but some people it's a divorce, a bankruptcy, a horrible diagnosis, loss of a loved one, you know, something that's like devastating. And what that is, in fact, is a pivotal moment. It's a moment where you're on a path and now there's a pivot. You can go in other directions. And about after the fall, that pivot point, for the next 18 months, it didn't change me. It was about 9 months actually initially, but it didn't change me. In fact, it intensified me. It intensified my ego. It intensified my drive. It intensified all those things. I was a ghetto kid. I was a leader. I'd been in leadership. So martial artist, boxer. So when people said, how you doing? I'd say, I'm great. I'm coming back. Well, I don't know if you know this, folks. There is no back in life. There's only forward. And so it was bullshit, and I knew it was bullshit. And so when I would be on my own, I would be in a very dark place, very depressed. And it wasn't until, like I said, about 9 months later, that I fell into a very, very dark depression as a result of, I'd been miserable for 9 months. I mean, I had not laughed and felt like I couldn't laugh. Felt like I'd somehow lost that ability. I had this night out with my boys, with my mates, and we went out, we had a good time, and I laughed. And I came home and I was in such a good mood. I thought, oh, you know, maybe I can come alive again. This is great. And I opened the door, and as the light opened in from the doorway, I could see across the kitchen floor was festooned garbage. There were meat wrappers and empty cans and coffee grinds and cat litter everywhere. And I was like, oh, Christ. And I went from being delighted to being fully enraged, not mad, enraged. I knew exactly who the culprit was, and I went looking for the culprit. And when I got into the living room, there was the culprit on my couch, curled up and all comfy. And honestly, in shame, I will tell you in great shame, I lifted my hand. I was about to strike. And about halfway down, I stopped and I touched my cat. And I picked him up in my arms and scooped him up in my arms, and he was cold and he was dead. And I fell to my knees and I began to weep. Yeah. Now, what you should know is I hated this cat. It was a cat that was given to me by a girlfriend who was trying to use it to manipulate me. So I didn't like the cat, but I would never have been cruel to it. I just didn't like cats. But I held that cat and I fell to the floor sobbing, not crying, sobbing. And I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't long before I realized, why am I sobbing about a cat that I don't really care about? And I suddenly realized I was grieving for the loss of the life that I had had. Right. As I fell to the floor, I realized that there were 3 paths in front of me. Go back, make it all happen, you know, find that success again. Well, I'd been trying that, and that was bullshit, and I knew it was bullshit, and so that wasn't going to work. The second path, which was incredibly seductive, was the path of saying, I'm a victim. It's not my fault this happened, so, you know, and I'll just bite the bullet and just get a job. And the third path was the most terrifying one of all, which was to look at the purpose of my life. Why was I really here? And if you'd have asked me the day before I fell if my life was on purpose, I would have said absolutely. But I didn't truly know my purpose. And something inside of me had always said that I was here for something bigger than what it was that I was doing, that it was a calling. But I didn't know how to face that. And I thought I was living it because I was being successful. I was helping people. I was touching lives. And I began to examine that. And I began to really look at what my shit was and deal with that and look at what was really driving me. And that's what I'm master at, is discovering what drives people at an unconscious level. And that path is what transformed me, not from the pivotal point of the event, but to the more important point, which is the choice point. So as people are listening to this, there's a very good chance that some of them are having a big aha moment, and they're going, oh my God, you know, this guy's like me, I went through that, or what, and they're having an aha. And I'm going to tell you this, and you may be upset about this, but I want you to know, no one gives a shit about your aha moment, including you. It's a nice ego boost that you can brag about for a minute, but your life won't change with aha moments. What has to happen is you have to go into a full-blown, here, wait for it, you may have to bleep this out, fuck it moment. It's that moment where you go, fuck it, I can't live like this anymore. Fuck it, fuck them, fuck me, I'm done. And that's the choice point, not the pivotal point, the choice point where everything changes. Because now you go, I can't do what I've done before. I have to do something else. I have to be more powerful. I have to step into this. And even though I'm terrified, this is what has to happen. That's the point where everything changes. And so back before I fell, I was in the public seminar business. And I remember after I fell and hitting this dark depression, and my buddy said to me, you know, do you think you'll ever come back? And I'm like, I am done with that. I'm done with speaking. I'm done with writing. I'm done with working with one-on-one clients. I'm done with that. And about a year later, he was at an event where I was speaking, and he said, I thought you were not going to do this. I said, I'm not. And he goes, what do you mean you're not? He goes, I just saw you on stage speak, and you said you're writing a book, and I know you're working with people, so what do you mean? I said, I'm not doing it. And he goes, am I on crack or what? And I said, no. What it looks like is the same. Where it's coming from is completely different. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. So sometimes it transforms and we go, I'm leaving the corporate job and I'm going to go travel the world. But right. Sometimes it looks like the vehicle is the same, but the engine is completely different. My purpose is the engine, not the car. It's not the vehicle. Who gives a shit about the vehicle? So yes, it looks the same, but where it's coming from at a heart and soul level is vastly different.
Sweet, very cool analogies. I like that. So let me ask you, holding the cat, you had a choice point coming.
Yes.
Was it that moment then that you made the decision to move in a different direction, or was it shortly thereafter, or when was it?
Well, like I said, it was when I was on the floor in that weeping. I mean, it was like, we're talking about, right. Like that position and feeling incredibly sorry for myself. And then that moment of like, okay, I can be the victim. I can stay here, sure. Or I can do the purpose thing. And the purpose thing was so terrifying because I think that it might not be terrifying for somebody who knows they don't know their purpose. But for me, it was terrifying because I thought I knew my purpose.
Right.
So it meant I had to, it was like ripping off my own flesh because I had to let go of the identity of who I was. Many of the leaders that I work with, they're CEOs and executives and people at this high level. And very often they'll be 60, 65 years old. And I go, I'm moving towards a phase in my life where I won't be this. And I go, you're right. Because when you think about it, when we go into a room, what do? We go, hi, I'm Dov. And you go, hi, I'm Shay. And then the next question is, what do you do?
Yep.
Oh, here's the news. I'm not what I do. But in our society, that is embedded. It's embroiled into our very cells. And so when suddenly I'm not the founder, the CEO, the whatever, now I don't know who I am. So the most difficult thing in the world is to face that your identity is at least partially false. And finding the truth of who you are, your soul's purpose, is what will transform the way you do business, the way you lead, the way you parent, the way you love. Transforms everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as you spent that time, actually, you know what? Let me go even further back. I want to take you back to your teenage years. So you said you actually made a decision at 14 years old to leave where you were. Mm-hmm. What drove that? I mean, I'm sitting here assuming poverty and the rough lifestyle you were living in, but what really drove a decision? Because
you would think that, but here's the thing. Again, big background in psychology. If you grow up in poverty, that's your normal.
Right.
As Oprah said, she grew up poor. She didn't know she was poor because everybody was poor.
Right.
Right? So, it's a bit different today because the internet exposes us to things that we didn't expose to. So it wasn't that I knew much different. So it wasn't really that at all. There were two events that took place that catalyzed me to get out.
Okay.
At 10 years old, I walked into the living room and my mom was crying. And being the eldest son, walking in and seeing your mom crying, there's what's going on, Mom? And she was wiping her eyes and pushing her glasses up as she wiped her eyes. And she just pointed at the TV set and said, "He's dead." And I said, "Who's dead?" And I looked, I didn't see anybody that I recognized. It wasn't a movie star or a TV star or a pop star. So I didn't know who it was. And then I started to listen. And he said, "I have a dream that one day," and I just was stunned. And I stood there and listened as a 10-year-old kid. And I went away and asked my uncle, who was kind of the brains of the family, "Who is this Martin Luther King?" And he told me about how he followed the path of Gandhi and peaceful resistance and all this. I was like, wow. And what was so impactful to me was that totally politically incorrect, because I'm going to give it to you as my 10-year-old, that a black man on the other side of the world, because, for me, that's where it seemed to be. So a black Christian man minister could impact my Jewish poverty-stricken mother on the other side of the world and have that much impact was like, wow. And that was the beginning of the seeds of me becoming a speaker and an influencer, an impactor, and a leader. But then at 14 years old, I was sitting in my living room. I was a weird kid that kids watch cartoons and they watched, their shows that they liked. Since I was a little kid, watched documentaries. I loved documentaries. I loved the BBC Two. People were like, "Why you watch that?" Big BBC Two fan when I was a kid. And, while other kids are watching the cartoons, I'm watching these great docos. So I was watching this documentary, and my mom came in, and it was a documentary that, for the hour, spanned 4 seasons moving across the country. Mm-hmm. But it was actually shot over 10 years. So you saw this girl and meets this guy, and they have a child, but it's shot in 4 seasons over a period of an hour. It was brilliantly done. It was very beautiful. And I was watching it. My mom said, "What are you watching?" And I said, "I don't know," because there was no language. It was completely silent. The entire documentary was silent. It's beautiful. Oh, it had background noises, but there was no dialogue.
Right.
So you'd hear crickets and things, but that was it. And I thought it was so beautiful, and I was awestruck by it. And she said, "What are you watching?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Why are you watching that?" I said, "Because that's where I'm going to go live." And she said, "Where is it?" And I said, "America," because that's what I thought.
Right.
What I now know is it was Canada.
Oh.
It started off in Nova Scotia. And the reason I know is because the last scene is the totem poles in Stanley Park, which are 7 minutes walk from where I live today.
Oh, very cool.
How's that for manifestation?
That's intense.
And that's so cool, eh? So I had made the decision there, because here's what's fascinating, and that's why I talked about poverty being normal. When I was a kid, so in England, you could legally drink at 16, which means you drink at 15. At 18, rather. So you drink at 15. You drink at 18, so you drink at 15. Yeah. And so I used to go to this particular pub with my mates, and we'd all sit around and we'd all bitch, moan, and complain. Mm-hmm. This place sucks. It's always raining, miserable. There's no jobs. All the whining and complaining. And I used to say, "Yeah, I'm out of here." And they go, yeah, we're going to leave. We're going to go live in Spain, or we're going to live wherever it is, And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm out of here." And they all rambled on and all moaned and all complained and all said they were going to do something. And then one day, when I was 20, I said, "I'm leaving." And they said, "Yeah, whatever. Yeah, we're all leaving. Yeah. I said, No, I'm going." And they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, first of all, I'm going to go to France and Italy. And then I'm thinking about going to Canada." Like, "Yeah, whatever." And then I came back one day and said, "I'm leaving tomorrow." And they're like, "What? You can't leave. We've got Man United. We've got Man City. We've got fish and chips. We've got Boddington's Bitter. Your family's here." What? And you see, this is what happens. When you make the decision to be bigger, the people who hold you back are the ones who, quote, love you, because it's the familiarity. We are human beings, are tribal beings. We want to keep our tribe with us. And in their mind, unconsciously, it is a way to protect me, is to keep me in the shithole that I grew up in. No, So I made the decision to leave. And it's interesting that I went back 4 or 5 years after I left, and I went to the pub, and I went to the table, and they were all there. And they all were, oh, oh, you were so lucky. There was no luck about it. I did it. You all got the chance. And one of the guys leans over to me. He goes, and I didn't understand what he was saying at first. He said to me, your shirts were always whiter. And I was like, what do you mean my shirts were always whiter? He goes, you cared a bit more than the rest of us. You gave a shit. He goes, you never showed up in a wrinkled shirt. Your shirts were always whiter. Somehow always were aspiring to something that we never got. And it's the way you're working. He says, I'm still working down at the ammunitions place.
May still be today.
Maybe. It's fascinating to me that so often we don't move forward because we trade authenticity for approval. We trade our own lives for the tribal mind. And I want to challenge everybody watching and listening to this to take a look at, are you following the tribal mind, your tribe, your family, the people you grew up around? Or are you following your heart and your soul and your life's purpose? Because that is a courageous journey. The work I do is for people who are on a heroic journey, because you're here to do more than just live inside the safety of your own tribe.
So tell me a little bit about this 18, 19-year-old you. So you made this decision at 14. What were you doing as you became a young adult to prepare yourself to get ready to make this big jump?
Good question. The answer is that I have to go back a bit further, is that when I was 7 years old, my mom thought I was possessed. I mean, she really did, because I would have these weird visions and I would say strange shit. And so she shipped me off to the rabbis and said, maybe there's something wrong with my kid. And so I started to study Kabbalah. I started to study the very basic stuff around Kabbalah as a small child. And then started to study on my own spiritual things. And at 11, started studying Prana Yoga, again, on my own. So I became very interested in philosophy and religious philosophy and metaphysical understanding of the way the world works.
Sure.
And what drove me was that study, along with, as a child, I remember saying to my mother, and I'm talking about when I'm 9 or 10 years old, to my mom, why do you do that? Or why does Aunt Jessie do that? Or why does Uncle Ellis do that? And my mom could never answer. But what I would notice is that people would do the same shit over and over again. I was fascinated by it. Tony Robbins, years ago, I heard him say, if you want to know what successful people do, if you want to be successful, do what successful people do.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any successful people. So I was fascinated with watching how people would do the same dumb stuff repeatedly. I would notice that my aunt was dating a new man with the same man with a new face. It was fascinating to me, right? He was going to end up giving her the knuckle sandwich. He was going to end up being mean, even though he was lovely and friendly. I could see it. And so that, within me, that hunger to understand how the world worked, how the universe worked, and how the mind worked was for me, it was a ferocious hunger. And so that I knew very clearly, even though, by the way, I owned businesses. I was an entrepreneur at 14. I started my own businesses right then. I had businesses in the UK before I left. I ran a business with 20 staff by the time I was 20 years old. So I had all that going on. So I was doing business and all those kinds of things. But I was like so thirsty, so hungry to know why people were driven this way. And I was certain that I wasn't going to get any further in that knowledge inside the confines of my tribe. Because in your tribe, it's kind of like having a rubber wall. It may be transparent. It looks like you can go out of it, but you will punch into it and it will bounce you back so fast in the name of love, in the name of protection, in the name of looking after you. So you actually have to take a knife and cut yourself out of there and to leave. But when you do, you weaken the shell and everybody will come around you and tell you, don't go. You know, you belong here. And I remember my stepmom saying to me, you're ashamed of where you come from. And I was like, where the hell did you get that from? Nothing to do with shame about where I came from. She goes, you think you're better than us? And I said, no, I think I'm better than this. I think I need to be better than this. And I think all of us need to be better than this. You know, so it's fascinating for me. So that was driving me all along in my teens. So I was running businesses, but always with this hunger that I knew there was more. And many of my clients who are now, you know, 40, 50, 60 years old are all saying, I know there's more, Dov. I'm very successful, but I know there's more. What is it? That was what drove me my entire life.
And so what did you find as you left the UK? What were some of your first experiences outside of the UK?
In France, the thing I found in France was the difference between Parisians and French people. Those are two different groups of people. The Parisians had zero tolerance for pommes, for Brits, and the French were lovely. They were very friendly and kind, and that wine was cheaper than water. Because I had no money, I drank a lot of wine. Bottled water was expensive. Cheap wine and white bread. No wonder I had a bad gut for a long time. But what I found was actually when I moved to New Brunswick, I was 21, and I'd been over on a trip a year before and spent a little bit of time. New Brunswick is a small province. I lived in Moncton, New Brunswick. It's a small city, and it was so vastly different to me because there were these massive houses, and we'd all lived in tiny little places with these massive houses, these huge American cars. It was so, quote, different, and people were smiley, and they were like, "Hi, how are you?" And "Hi," you know. I was like, "The hell is wrong with these people? Are they all smoking something?" Right? Whatever you're on, I'll take two. And I'll ship a box back to home. But, you know, I found something fascinating because of the background in psychology. One of the things I found fascinating was what I called a smiley face mentality. You know, the smiley face, the yellow smiley face? Mm-hmm. Is that people in North America would often wear a smiley face, that they would not show their real feelings. They would be friendly, they would be nice, but they wouldn't be real. And that drove me nuts. That absolutely infuriated me. The other people at home, they were all angry, right? And that's all they knew.
And they were honest about
it. They were honest about the anger, but they weren't honest about why they were angry. So they didn't understand, because they didn't understand. And in North America, they were being friendly and nice because that's what they thought they were supposed to be. And so I became fascinated by that. But what was interesting was, as different as it all was, Moncton, New Brunswick is, like I said, is a small city. And where I grew up in Salford, as I said, very tribal, very small, and very much about you're one of us, you know, you're one of the tribe. And what I found was that when I went to New Brunswick, people were very friendly and very warm and very inviting, just like my hometown, but you couldn't get in. You couldn't get in. You were always an outsider. Even though they were warm and friendly to me, you were an outsider. And I knew that where I'd grown up in Salford, they were exactly that too. It was like, how interesting that these two worlds that seem so vastly different are so on par. Mm-hmm. But here's where I got it. Didn't get it until many, many years later. Many, many years later, living here in Vancouver. And when I first moved to Vancouver, somebody had said to me, you should know something about Vancouver. It's very cliquey. And I said, what do you mean? People are very cliquey here. Oh, okay. Well, I arrived August the 8th, 1988. The first day I was in town, I walked from the top of the hill on Burrard Street down towards the water. It is spectacular. It's a blue sky. The mountains, you can see through the high-rise, beautiful buildings. You can see the mountains in the distance and the ocean. Gorgeous. And I'm walking down that street, and no less than 5 people stopped to speak to me. Totally warm, totally friendly, totally inviting. When I got to the bottom of that hill, which is about a 2-mile walk, went into a pub. I went in this pub, started talking to some people. That night, they took me out in a limousine to all the nightclubs, to a party. and had me stay at their place. I mean, incredibly warm and friendly. No sign of anything that was relatively cliquey. Fast forward about 7 or 8 years. 7 or 8 years later, and somebody said something about clicks, and I went, yeah, Vancouver is very cliquey. And I caught myself. I went, that's interesting. I remember people saying that to me, and I never found that. What is it? And I went, oh, it's me. See, there's this great story about a man who is going on his travels, and he's going to this foreign city, and he says, and as he gets out of the airport, he sees a man on the street, and he says, oh, what's it like here? And he says, well, what was it like where you came from? He goes, well, people are pretty moody and pretty dark. He goes, yeah, you'll find the same here. And another man comes out of the airport and meets the same guy, and he says to him, what's it like here? He goes, where are you from? He tells him, he says, what's it like there? And he goes, people are lovely, they're warm and friendly. He goes, yeah, you'll find the same here. We forget that we are the common denominator of everything in your life. If you're looking around and you think people are shit, you might want to take a trip to the mirror. If you find that the economy is shit and you can't get a break, go to the mirror. If you keep finding yourself in relationships with complete bitches or complete assholes, you might want to go look in the mirror. You don't live in the world, you live in the mirror. Everything is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. Deal with that, and your world transforms.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit then about how you went down that path of looking in the mirror after holding the dead cat.
After what? I'm sorry?
After you had the choice point where you walked into your apartment and found the mess with the dead cat.
Right. So you should know that at that point, I was 32 years old. I had begun my personal development, self-knowledge journey spiritually at 7, but psychologically at 19. So I'd been at it a while. I was already 13 years into it.
Sure.
So, and one of the challenges was that where I really got it to look in the mirror was that I realized in that dark depression that I had a ton of spiritual ego. Well, those are two words that people don't put together, but they actually belong very well together. And it was, I'm more enlightened than you because I've done this. I'm more enlightened than you because I've done that. Well, you don't understand. I've been to India. I hung out with the gurus. Well, you don't understand. I was 10 years in therapy. Well, you don't understand. I've been to all Tony Robbins workshops. You don't understand. I've been to all Dov Barron's workshops. You don't understand. I've been to Tony Robbins, Dov Barron's, and I've been to India. Me. It's spiritual ego. And I realized that as much self-knowledge and as self-work as I'd done, that I was carrying a ton of spiritual ego. And spiritual ego tends to manifest in the ways that I've just said, but it also manifests like this: I can help you. And what do I mean by that? It means that the implication is there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And that is how I operated before I fell. Since I've come out of that, there's nothing wrong with you. You're already whole, complete, and perfect. And the analogy I will give you is, if I give you a perfectly cut diamond, a huge, magnificent diamond worth $100 million. It's perfect. It's magnificent. And then I give you 100 blankets to cover it up in. How much of the diamond can you see? You say none. I go, take a blanket off. How much can you see? None. There's nothing wrong with the diamond, no matter how many blankets are on top of it. My job is to peel the blankets off you because you are the diamond.
So how did you peel the diamond, or I'm sorry, how did you peel the blankets off of you?
As Joseph Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter is the one that holds the treasure. I began to go to the places I was terrified to go to. We must look into that dark place. We must look into the place we most fear to look in. Every great piece of philosophical literature talks about it, whether it's Star Wars, where Yoda sends Luke into the cave, and Luke says, well, will I find Vader there? And he said, you'll have to see. And when he goes inside, what does he find? He finds Vader, and he pulls Vader's helmet off, and it's himself. It's there, right? Um, whether it's in Dune, the Gaban Jabbar, which is the dark place, and you go to the dark place, and he says, when you go there, you will find me. It is this darkness. It is facing your own darkness. And that was where I began to peel it away. I began to look at the places in me that I hated secretly, the parts of myself that I hid. Before we started the interview, tell us what I said to you. What did I say about the questions you can ask me?
Anything. I can ask you anything.
Because I've been to the dark cave. There's nothing anybody can ask me. I'm fully willing to go there because there's nothing that will ever, I'm not afraid of who I've been. I know that it all formed, crafted, and shaved me. And some of that I have very deep emotional and very often very physical scars. But there's nothing to hide. I'm not ashamed of who I've been. I am healthily shamed by it. There's difference. So I'm not ashamed. I don't carry that shame around. But I have healthy shame, which means I see what I did. I see that it was damaging and I never want to go there again. So I carry healthy shame to remind me that is not for me.
Can you give us a concrete example of what you mean by that?
Healthy shame?
Yeah, in a personal sense, what's something that drives that statement that you made?
My wife and I were invited to a private wedding in the Caribbean. Select number of people, apparently very high profile, blah, blah, blah. We're invited. I knew the bride online. I'd never met her, but we'd had these kinds of conversations.
Sure.
My wife had never met her, and I knew nobody else at this wedding. So we get there, and it's very, hoity-toity. And there comes a point where it's, meet the bride and groom. My wife's like, I don't know anybody here. She goes, this is really uncomfortable. And the bride says to my wife, oh, I'm so excited to meet you. I admire you. And my wife's like, you don't know me. She goes, oh, I've heard Dov talk about your marriage and how much he loves you and how you are his beloved. And, it's so wonderful. And she says to my wife, what are your secrets? And she says, well, we have two. And she goes, okay, what are they? Number one, don't try and change the other person. Nobody changes unless they want to. So just don't bother trying. Challenge them to be bigger and better and greater and step into their greatness, which we do every day with each other, but don't try and change it. Okay, she goes, okay, I can understand that. She said, the second one, you'll probably misunderstand because most people do and they only hear the first part. And she said, what's that? And she said, divorce is always an option. And the new bride said, oh, I'm so surprised. I thought you guys would, you would never make that an option. She goes, that's the first part. Divorce is always an option for my partner. That is in our vows. And the reason it's in our vows is because it's healthy shame. I know I was a shitty partner in previous relationships. I know how I was a shitty partner. So I want my wife to know every single day, divorce is an option, babe. If I don't treat you like the queen that you are, you have every right to say, I'm done. And that is healthy shame that keeps me at my top of my game. Every night before I go to bed, I tell my wife out loud how much I love, appreciate her, and I'm grateful for her and why I'm grateful. And every morning I thank her for saying yes to marry me. That's not something I do by route. It's something I do with full emotional presence because I was a shitty partner in previous relationships. Healthy shame.
Excellent. Great example. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about change, just in general. You've talked a little bit about, the internal change where it was you've changed the engine, not the vehicle that you're using. And you work with lots and lots of people who are looking to change their lives.
Yes.
What is the number one most important piece of advice you can give somebody who's considering a change in direction in their life?
Great question. So the best piece of advice I can give you is to become psychic.
Awesome.
Good practical advice, Dov.
Absolutely. Why not?
But actually, it is practical advice, and I'll tell you how. There's a technique I teach. And so what I want you to do is I want you right now, Shay, think
Okay.
of something you want to change in your life. You don't have to tell me what it is. It's okay. Just
Okay.
think of something you want to change in your life. Okay.
Okay.
Whatever it is, as you watch this and listen to this, take notes, write down, here's what I want to change. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to imagine your life 1 year from now with that not changed. How will that not changing it impact not just the area in which it exists? So it might be your finances, it might be your relationship, whatever it is, but how will it impact other areas of your life as well? Now move that 5 years forward and say, if I don't change it, how will it impact me in 5 years and in all the different areas? How will my health be? What will my mental state be? How will my relationships be? What will my finances be like? What will my career be like? How will I be perceived as a human being? Now move it to 10 years. It's called consequential thinking. Move the consequence of the thing you need to change forward step by step by step by step until, and this is what's very important. So some people stop and go, yeah, it's kind of suck. I should really need to change it. No, don't stop there. If you don't get there in 10, go to 20. It's okay. Because you need to reach a point that is a fuck it moment. You need to get to the point of going, oh my God, I could not live with that. I'm 20 years older and I'm still doing this shit. And it's damaged the way that I am with my kids. It's damaged my relationship with my grandkids or my nieces and nephews or my family or my beloved or my business. I got to change this now. I have seen the future. So one of the things I get people to do is when they've done that, they have to write why they have to change it. And they say, it starts with, I have seen the future. And I will change this because, and then they write.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's a simple, practical technique that you can use right now. Sit down with your piece of paper and do it right now. And I promise you, you'll get off and change. Because here's the thing you need to know. I know people tell you set goals and imagine them, you know, that's wonderful. But let me just tell you something. Human beings are motivated more by pain and loss than they are by gain and pleasure. Did you hear what I said? Human beings are more motivated by pain and loss than we are by gain and pleasure. So you have to do this because if you, oh yeah, it's going to be great when I hit the goal. No, you're probably not going to do it. But if you keep the pain, like I always say, keep your eye on the goal, keep the fire on your ass. And as you move closer to goal, the likelihood is you'll move further away from the fire. So you have to pull the fire with you. You have to keep saying, you know what? I got to keep working at this. It's kind of hard. It's kind of shitty. I don't want to stop. Yeah, but you know what? I've seen the future. I've been and seen Psychic Shay, and he said, this is what's happening. Whoa, you know, call me now. Welcome to Shay's Psychic Line. 1-800-SHAY.
Get my cards out.
Exactly. I'm looking into my crystal testicle, and I can tell you, this is not good, man.
Oh, he's ugly. So what's burning your ass right now?
What's burning my ass is the same thing that is always burning my ass, which is my mission, my purpose in life is to transform the lives of others. And what that means is helping people to really understand the primary drivers of what it is, what I call emotional logic. Everybody has emotional logic. So let me just give you a simplicity of that. In rational logic, what is 2 + 2?
Someplace around 4.
Right. Of course it is. That's logical, right? In emotional logic, 2 + 2 is a giraffe, or a banana, or a chair, or rage, or love, because you have an emotional equation inside of your head that makes perfect sense. And if you don't believe me, think about that fight you had with your wife, and you went, why did I do that? Why did I even say that? I know that's dumb. Or why is my best friend doing this? This is a very smart individual. I can't believe they're doing that. Because it's not rational. It's emotional logic, not rational logic.
Right.
And so that is what we have to do. We have to get in touch with that part of ourselves, find out what is the primary driver. For me, when I'm always driven by this mystery with a person that I'm, you know, like I said, I love doing it. I'm very good at it, but I love doing it. And for me, you know, every night in my statements of gratitude is that I want to raise the hearts, the souls, and the minds of every person I speak to, my audience of 1 or 1 billion. So it doesn't matter. So it keeps the fire on my ass if I go at the end of my day and go, how many lives did I impact today? And I do not want to die knowing there were lives I could have touched that I missed, not because they weren't available to me, but because they were available to me and I missed it, because I was lazy or because I was a coward. And so I used harsh words like that because they're important. They move us. So was I lazy? Was I a coward today? Did I make puppies instead of really doing something that made a difference? That keeps the fire on my ass every day.
Cool. So you definitely have a drive. I can totally see that.
Really?
You had a significant change point after the fall and holding the cat.
Yeah.
You had an opportunity today to go back and talk to that young man who had not climbed up that waterfall yet. 2 things. 1, would you give him any advice? And number 2, if you would, what would it be?
I wouldn't give him any advice. I'd ask him some questions, but I wouldn't give him advice. And the reason for that is because he wouldn't listen.
What questions would you ask?
I would ask him, are you on purpose? And he would have said yes. And I would have said, how do you know? See, because I know that guy would have thought about that question. How do you know? And then I would have asked him, why are you an adrenaline junkie? You see, I fell in June 1990. And in November of that same year, with my jaw wired closed, I went bungee jumping 140 feet. And I used to go with my buddy Marcus, who was my quote unquote adrenaline twin. That's what we used to call each other. We used to do crazy shit together, riding around on hoods of cars at 60 miles an hour and doing all kinds of stupid stuff. And I was supposed to go bungee jumping with him. And for whatever reason, he couldn't come, and I still went. And I saw him like a week later, and he says, I was bungee jumping. And I said, it was awesome. It was so awesome. And he said, yeah, tell me about it. And we're all both really excited. And I went, you know what? And he goes, what? I said, I'm a liar. He goes, it wasn't awesome? I said, that's not what I'm lying about. He goes, what do you mean? I said, here's what happened. You get onto the platform, they bind your feet, you put the bungee cord on, they stand you close to the edge there, and you're hanging onto the railings. And he says, now what's going to happen is I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, bungee. And when I say bungee, you jump. I said, okay. I said, and he said 3. And I went, if I don't go now, I ain't fucking going. If I wait for 2 and 1, I'm not moving, because I was terrified. I said, so he said 3. And I remember seeing the blue sky, the pine trees, and I jumped. And that's the last thing I remember until I bounced at the bottom, which is the woohoo that everybody makes. And I said, I finally got it. And he said, you got what? That's what I'm doing. And he goes, what do you mean? What are you doing? I said, I'm waiting for the woohoo moment. And he goes, well, what is that? I said, that sense that I'm passionately alive, that I face death and I'm passionate and alive. I went, I can live there. I can live there. If that guy might have known that, if I'd have been able to ask him questions to know that, he might not have climbed that day. So it wouldn't be about trying to give him any philosophical bullshit that he would have ignored and said, I already know that, because he had an ego, spiritual ego. Not that I don't. Of course I do. Everybody does. But his was out of control. But if I'd have given him those questions, and so from that day on, I decided, so I've never done any adrenaline sports since that day. I have no desire. It doesn't even interest me, because I can live in that moment of being dynamically alive when I show up with Shay, or whether I go and be with my wife or be with my children or my grandchildren, or whoever, my clients.
So you're still an adrenaline junkie, just in a different form now?
No, I don't see that in me at all. Actually, I kind of I've gone the other way. Actually, in 2015, my house burned down, and my wife and I suffered severe PTSD from it. She, fortunately, being much healthier than me, felt it right away. I was on a speaking tour. That was November. I was on a speaking tour in March on the East Coast, and 6 gigs back to back. and went into full-blown panic attacks and anxiety. Felt like my chest was being crushed. And so adrenaline has no appeal to me at all. And I try to make sure that I stay in a very centered place, not calm. I think calm's horseshit. It's like that smiley face, right? It's horseshit. I'm passionate. I'm vibrant. I'm alive. But I'm not jonesing for a hit. I'm driven to serve every day. How can I serve? That's it.
Cool. Well, let me ask you a cliche question. What's the most important thing in life?
My purpose. Fulfilling my purpose every single day. Fulfilling my purpose.
Awesome.
Touching the lives. And so this is the thing. I teach a course, and you can find it on my website, fullmontyleadership.com. And if you go /products, you scroll down, you'll see the courses. And I teach a course in there. And in that course, what I say is, here's how you'll know when you're living your purpose. And they go, okay, how? When you're committed to serving people who will never know your name and whose name you'll never know. If I can serve, so many years ago, this was after I had the fall, and I'd come back and I'd committed to my purpose. But the problem with being on purpose is you don't really know. You don't really know because there's no direct feedback loop. You've got it yourself. And I'd done this training, and at the end of the 3-day training, people are very generous, very kind. They lined up to say thank you. And I live in Canada, so people say thank you as a courtesy. And for me, I know that I'm aware that I have a plexiglass shield that shit bounces off and doesn't make it in. And I don't want that. I want to take it in. I want to honor the person who's giving it to me, and I want to take it in. So I answer that question when somebody says, I'd like to say thank you. I say, would you mind telling me specifically for what? Because that makes my mind and a gauge. Okay. And I said, this one lady came up. She was maybe early 40s, red hair, nice looking lady. And she came up, she said, I'd like to thank you. And I said, may I ask you for what? And she was wonderful. She took a pause. And she said, I'd like to thank you for my grandchildren. And I said, well, you don't look old enough to have grandchildren. And she said, I'm not. But I've been in this training this 3 days and understanding my purpose. And that over there is my daughter. You can see she's pregnant, and that's her husband with her. And I said, yeah. And she said, yeah, she's about to have a baby in about 3 months. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And she goes, yeah, I'll be a grandma. And she goes, what I've learned from you has transformed my relationship with my daughter, with my son-in-law, and will ultimately impact my relationship with my grandchild. And I want to thank you for that. And at that moment, my eyes started to leak.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I knew that was when I knew I was on purpose. That how you know you're on purpose is you're committed to serving people who will never know your name, whose names you may never know. I have no idea what that kid's name is, and I'm sure it doesn't know my name. But if I impacted his grandmother or her grandmother and her mom, and it made them better parents and grandparents, then I'm living my purpose and I'm blessed.
That is fantastic, man. That's a great place for us to start wrapping up here too. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being open and honest with me today. I greatly appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure.
If people want to know a little bit more about you or get in touch with you, what are the best means or methods to do that?
My main website is fullmontyleadership.com. fullmontyleadership.com. You can go there. My blog is there. There's over 500 articles on there. We post new articles twice a week on there. My podcast is on there. The access to my podcast is on there, with the #1 podcast in the world for Fortune 500 listeners. But it's not just Fortune 500. It's really good stuff, and I have amazing guests, so you'll find that there. If you have Roku TV, I have a channel on Roku TV. You can find me on that. I have a channel on there, and I'm featured on 3 other channels. We have a YouTube channel, Dov Baron Full Monty Leadership. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter @the Dov Baron, on Instagram, Dov Baron Leadership, and of course, Facebook, Dov Baron Leadership, and a bunch of groups on there. As I said, there's courses, there's books. You can go on Amazon. I think 12 books you can find on there. So lots of different things and courses. But here's the thing, and everybody thinks I'm mental for doing this, but I'm going to do it. I want you to know something. I'm here to serve. I said that. But information's worth the hole in the donut. Who gives a shit? If you want information, go to Google. There's years and years and years of information. Information's worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from application. I want to know what you did with this. So here's what I'm going to do. Like a crazy person that I am, maybe this is my adrenaline, is my email, my personal email is dov@dovbaron.com. Dov@dovbaron.com. I want you to write to me, and I want you to CC Shane and tell him and us what you got out of this and what you're going to do with it. And if I can help you, and if you want to reach out to me personally and say, hey, Dov, I'd like to work with you, then sure, of course, do that too. But write to us and tell us what you got out of this and what you're going to do with it. And if you look on this channel, on Shay's channel, you see he's got all these great interviews with these outstanding individuals. He's doing this to serve you. So you know what? You need to subscribe, and you need to comment, you need to rate and review, because all that is part of the feedback loop that lets Shay know that what he's doing is having impact on you and the lives that you touch. So please go subscribe to the channel, rate and review, and email me, dov@dovbaron.com. Send an CC Shane in it. Let us know what you got out of this and what you're going to do with it, because we are here to serve.
Dude, thank you. That's phenomenal. I greatly, greatly appreciate that. That is awesome. I always wrap up with one question. And that question is, I know a little of your story. I know a little more of your story now and about what you do, but I always miss something. So the question is, what question should I have asked you?
That's a very good question. So what question should you have asked me? How do I define love?
Oh, beautiful question. How do you define love?
Love is a verb. Love is action. Love is not unconditional. Unconditional love is bullshit. If there is a God, you may believe, you may not believe, then maybe it, she, he loves you unconditionally. Human beings don't. People who love genuinely have boundaries, healthy boundaries. So love has healthy boundaries. It is actionable both ways. So if you're going to love, you need to know what's non-negotiable. I still love everybody I've ever loved. I don't want to be around some of them, but I still love them because I have healthy boundaries. And love starts here, not there. The world we live in, we think love starts there. You're going to make me happy. I'm going to fall in love with you. Fall in love with yourself. And that includes the stuff you find in that dark cave. Fall in love with your shadow. There is a nasty ass bastard who lives inside of me who was there from the ghetto. I love him to bits because he has gotten me through the darkest depressions. He has given me the fuck you when I felt like I was beaten. Fall in love with you. There's also a magnificent side of me that is magnanimous and loving and caring. I need both sides. You are yin and yang. You are light and dark. Love starts internal, and love is action with boundaries.
So thank you so much for all of this today. I greatly appreciate your time, your insights, and your advice. This has been a blast, and I wish you nothing but the luck and happiness that you deserve in the future.
Thank you, Shay.